Hey everyone, welcome to our panel, Git Tips and Tricks I wish I had known sooner. Here with some Git experts from around the world, literally around the world. So we're gonna go around very quickly and just do a quick introduction to ourselves. I'm Dwayne McDaniel, I'm developer evangelist here at GitKraken and coordinator for GitKon, and I'll be hosting this panel. Why don't we go with you, Sean?
Hey folks, I'm Sean Dietrich. I'm a senior operations architect at Kanopi Studios and do a lot of development, also part of the open source community, work with Doxel and a few other tools as well.
All right, Carl.
Hi, I'm Carl Alexander. I'm a PHP consultant. I've been with the WordPress community for over a decade. I also work as a sysadmin, and I have a startup called Ymir that does serverless WordPress sites.
Cool. Rob?
Hi, I'm Rob Richardson. I'm a developer advocate for Cyral. I'm also a Microsoft MVP, Docker captain, and a friend of Redgate.
Awesome. Nick?
Hey, I'm Nick Hodges, a longtime software developer and then software development manager. And I am currently the development team advocate at LinearB.
Definitely not least, Meriem.
Hello, my name is Meriem Zaid. I'm front-end developer at Enova in Morocco. I'm also part of Developer Cycles program by Facebook in Rabat and Casablanca, and also part of the GitKraken Ambassador program.
Next up, I'm curious, always curious the story whenever I talk to anybody about Git. Like, do you remember how you first encountered Git and version control, and like how you went about learning it? Rob, why don't we start with you on this?
Yeah, sure. I started with CVS. I moved from CVS to Subversion. And when the time came to move to Git, then it just felt like a natural evolution. I don't remember setting out to learn Git per se, but it was fun to jump in. Moving from a traditional version control system to a distributed version control system was kind of weird. And I did play with Mercurial for a minute. But once I got the hang of it, I love Git, and it's really fun to be able to play here.
Awesome. Nick, how about you? Do you remember the first time you encountered it?
My first version control system was Subversion. And I remember coming to a new company and as the product director, excuse me, and we were using Visual Source Safe as opposed to, and so I immediately moved us to what I wanted to be Git, but this was probably about 10 or 12 years ago, and we found Git was not Windows friendly at the time, but so we moved to Mercurial. And but eventually we realized that Git had kind of won the battle of everybody, and we moved to Git. And I remember my starkest memory of learning Mercurial and Git was how could you possibly not check out and lock files? How is that going to work?
And somehow it does.
Indeed.
Carl, how about you?
Oh my goodness. I don't exactly remember, but the thing is WordPress itself is still on Subversion. So early on when you were doing WordPress, it was always Subversion. And it's just once Git started getting popular, and especially GitHub, that we started all using Git. And for me, it was just kind of a night and day. Even at my agency, we used Subversion, and I was just like, handling merges, and it was very frustrating to deal with. And Git was just kind of magical at that. It was quick. It handled these scenarios and teams so well. So it was just, I switched and I never really looked back since then.
And Sean?
I'm very similar. I don't remember. So I know that Git was my first system that I did learn. I don't remember when I learned it or how I came across it. All I do is now remember back in my days when I was developing, and I used to push things up directly through like FTP or something, and I would say like dot old one, dot old two, and now I'm looking back to those days like, what was I thinking? Like, why didn't I not think about this sooner? And then so I don't remember how how I came across it. I know that I came across it, and then I started learning a few other things back when Drupal was on CVS, and back in those days, and now as Carl had said, like WordPress is on SVN, and I'm like, how are these other systems not using Git directly? And so now it's just like that's all I use.
Right on. Meriem, yeah, how did you first encounter Git?
Well, out of curiosity, I found myself using GitHub back in 2014, creating my first repository and starting using commands out of the blue and not knowing how to use them. And yeah, it was pretty much new for me. I was at high school back then. They didn't teach us how to use Git at school, so I had to figure out how to go on a good path and start using it from then to now.
So, name of this session is Git Tips and Tricks I Wish I Had Known Sooner. I'm assuming that's why most people are tuning into this particular panel here at GitKon. So why don't we just dive right in? Hopefully you've had a little bit of chance to think about that topic since you were invited to be on this panel. So let's go around. Nick, you look like you got some on the tip of your tongue there.
Yeah. Probably the coolest thing that I've learned about Git lately is just the API and how the API can gain insight into your repository. That's how we use it here at LinearB, and the ability to query the API about your repository and find out any kind of piece of information that you want to know about the repository programmatically is a very, very cool ability.
So just to clarify there, when you say the API, you're talking about the Git plumbing?
Yes.
Yeah.
The idea that you can make a HTTPS or HTTP call and get back a JSON response with information about the Git repository, asking for whatever you want to know about users, about check-ins, about commits, anything.
Is that the GitHub API?
Well, yes. I guess that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry if I was not clear about that.
No worries at all. Yeah.
The two, sometimes you forget that Git and GitHub are not the same. Forgive me.
Carl, what's something you wish you'd have known sooner?
It's not so much something I'd known sooner, but it's more something I wish I'd started using sooner. It's Git hooks. So you can configure Git to run specific things when you're committing or at different steps of the committing or process. And I now rely on this heavily for, let's say, like running tests. Whenever I commit code, like it's an easy way to, on your local machine and coordinating with developers, to have like a kind of run a certain, not necessarily all your tests, but you can run like the quick tests and make sure you didn't break anything before you send it up and send it up to the more proper CI platform. So for me, that's or just linting, like things like linting, like syntax checking, like just having all this kind of tooling run before sending code up, and then you're stuck fixing things and coordinating with other developers because you broke something, I find is really, really useful. In PHP, there's a tool called Grump, actually, which I find it's like Grump PHP, and it's like an old man, and basically like you can set it up to run like a ton of different tools that you want, PHP tools. And basically it'll just like, if it fails, you just see it like a grumpy old man, like in your console, like just saying like fail. And it's like, and like, no, you can't commit. So I find that's like, for me, that's like the tool I've used, but I don't know if I can't speak for the other programming languages, but in PHP, I really, really like this tool to just kind of like force, because it manages all the hooks for you too, which is like, it's a bit harder to do, like if you're coordinating over a team, like a team of programmers. So because the Git hooks, it's like in the configuration and things like that. So you have to like, there's no way to, as far as I know, I don't think you can push like a Git Ymir with like all the hooks that need to run for the projects.
Exactly. The hooks directory is inside the .git directory, so you can't commit it directly. And that's kind of a problem because if I create some awesome hooks, I need the ability to share them with you. So tools like GitHooks, Husky, Grump PHP are great at being able to create symlinks of scripts outside the .git folder that get run as part of doing each of those Git steps. It's really cool.
Absolutely. Well, since you got the floor, Rob, why don't you go next?
Awesome. What I like, one of the things that I learned about Git, which I think is amazing, I call this the developer's dilemma. I've reached a point in my code. Maybe I finished coding and I want to start debugging, and I want to save that point. With a traditional version control system like TFS or SVN, I can commit this and inflict it on all of you, or I cannot commit it and lose that save point. And so then we start reverting to other source control systems like copy folder versioning. Let me create a .bu folder or a .old folder. Oh, wait, I already have one. Let me create one with today's date. Oh, I already did this today. Let me put the time. And the moment we have to step away from our source control system is kind of the moment that we've stepped into the weeds. What's really elegant about Git is it separates the commit from the push. I can save my work, and then later I can choose to publish that work. And so it's really elegant. And when it comes time to publish the work, I can then squash out all of the intermediate, nope, that wasn't it, because those aren't really relevant when I'm trying to tell the story of what changes I made. What I love about distributed version control systems like Mercurial and Git is that I can commit as often as I need to, every hour, every few minutes, whenever I reach a save point. And then when I'm ready to publish that content, I can push that off to others and share my successes.
Right on. Meriem, I've called on you last every other time, so I don't know what's something you wish you'd have learned about Git sooner?
Yeah, well, we will all agree that Git doesn't solve our problem. It's just a part of other problems. So when we're struggling with Git, chances are that the workflow we have in our team just couldn't the workflow could use some little work, but actually no. I wish I had known how that rebasing isn't that magical, because when I've been stepping around learning to rebase for a while, and when I did, I wondered why I didn't learn it sooner. It's very neat when working in a team setting and makes for way smoother development workflows than haphazard merging back and forth. That the branch is not just a pointer to a commit. It's very important to know, because it's a reference. It's tracked by a reflog. It's when we add new commits to a branch, the pointer moves to the newest commit automatically. But a branch isn't much more than a fancy name following a chain of commits. It's few of a lot of things I wish I had known about Git, and also last few years, mainly 4 years ago, I wish I had known more about the pipelines, because it facilitates much of work, especially if we're new to DevOps and we start using containers such as Docker or Kubernetes.
Yeah, very much. As DevOps has morphed into GitOps in so many respects, like everybody always feels like they should have learned it sooner. So awesome. And Sean, definitely not least, last in this round. What's something you wish you knew sooner?
There's a few different things. I mean, I definitely want to echo what Carl said earlier about the Git hooks. That was a big thing. Definitely, the one thing I had learned sooner is that when you're first starting into Git, it's okay to use a GUI, especially for new people who are trying to get involved with it. And definitely, like, there are multiple GUIs out there, so being able to choose one that works good for you. So that was a thing I had wished I had learned earlier, because I started off with one, and I always thought, like, hey, this is the one I have to use. like this is the one that everybody's suggesting I use, so that's going to be great. And now that I've evolved, it's like, no, it's not really that one that I chose was just someone recommended. And there are probably at least dozens of different tools out there to use. And definitely, I think the most recent one, you touched on it a little bit, Dwayne, was about when you start to get into GitOps. And so not storing compiled assets, not storing a lot of your minified CSS, your minified JavaScript tools that you can minify in like a CI pipeline, not storing them in the actual repository actually makes your repo smaller in the aspect of things, and it makes it easier for you to start developing, and then and eventually leads to not having merge conflicts in the long run of things, which makes you no longer have a headache sometimes. So
right on. Well, I know people tuned in for this for the tips and tricks part. So what's your favorite like little trick? What's your favorite command or set of parameters or something that you just think is cool that you use on the regular? And like, how do you use that? Like, what do you use it for? Carl, why don't we start with you?
I think for me, at least, I think for the trick, I mean, it depends on what type of developer you are, but I'm a guy that likes to do micro commits. So I really like being able to like take the time and like commit the right lines of code, even though I like probably have like half my files modified. I don't want to commit like all the things. So for me, that's always been like my kind of like trick to like clean up. I've just dealt a lot with cleaning up commits for other people. That to me, that was always like the best trick that I found, was like being able to stage specific lines.
That might be brand new information for some folks tuning in, that you don't have to commit the entire file at a time. You can just pick hunks or specific lines.
Yeah, chunks or like specific lines. I mean, to me, that was also like a game changer when I discovered Git, to be honest. Like I remember I was like, I'm never going to use anything that doesn't have this feature ever again, basically. Because for me, it was so good. Because I mean, we're all developers here, or have been, and like you're writing files, you have comments everywhere, and then you're like, I want to just commit this one line. I don't want to have to erase everything, or like, and so to me, that was like a game changer.
Cool. Move down to you, Meriem. What's your favorite like Git trick or your favorite command?
There are two actually. One for lazy developers. I'm not one of them, but I love to. I like to use it sometimes. It's the autocorrect feature in Git. Sometimes you just in a hurry and you type, for example, git log, and you type and you find yourself typing git lag or something. So so this feature allows you to autocorrect or give you just hints about the correct command. We all make typos sometimes, but if we have the Git autocorrect feature enabled, you can let Git automatically fix a mistype the subcommand. Just as I said, for git log or git status, suppose we want to check the status with git status, but we type git stats by accident. Under normal circumstances, Git will tell us that stats is not a valid command. And to avoid the similar scenarios with other commands, we can enable Git autocorrection in our Git configuration. It's very easy to configure, and it's very helpful.
Actually didn't know that, so that's a really good tip.
I just found out about this by chance. I wasn't looking for something similar because I knew that GitHub would not allow something like this. I was surprised.
Cool.
Yeah.
Rob, why don't you lay something on us?
Yeah. I know we're going to talk about rebase next, so I won't spoil it, but I really like rebase. What I'm going to focus on instead is Git aliases.
Oh,
what
okay.
Git aliases allow us to do is to create other commands in Git. So for example, I a lot of times I'll type in git log dash dash one line dash dash graph dash dash decorate dash dash all dash 10. And I typed that command a lot. So I created an alias for myself called hist. So I just say git hist dash 10, and it shows me all the things. I created a similar alias called git. So you know how you're like typing a git command and you type git space and then you get distracted and then you come back to your terminal and then you type git status and it says, hey, git is not a command. Well, I have a git alias that is called git. So if I type git status, it goes, oh, okay, git status. And here you go. Now, aliases are a little dangerous because it's possible to rename commands. It's possible to make it feel like TFS or Subversion or CVS. And that's really, really dangerous. Don't use aliases to abstract away Git, but instead use aliases to make your task really simple.
Right on. That's really good advice there. And Nick.
Well, Dwayne, you asked my favorite Git command, which would have to be git revert. Without that, I don't know where we'd be, right? But the other one thing I was just would echo with Carl is I'm a micro committer as well, and being able to commit individual lines is really great. Thanks.
And Sean, did I already ask you? Okay.
No.
All right, Sean.
But I think there's a few of them, and I'm trying to really home in on which one is my favorite. I'm definitely a fan of git reset, to be able to reset a branch to a specific commit, especially when there's like things that were committed that shouldn't have been, that you need to figure out like where the issues happened. I'm also a fan of git stash. So if you're working on something at the moment and you're like, hey, I don't want to commit this at the moment. I just want to hold on to this and be able to either pull in new changes or be able to switch your branch altogether. Git stash is a huge one for me. Although I feel like it's named incorrectly. I use git blame a ton because I'm trying to figure out at what point did this line of code change, and with the mixture of git log specifically is sort of, I think, some of the top ones I use a lot. So I think those are a mixture of all my favorites.
Right on. So thank you very much. We asked the community for their questions. We're not going to be able to probably get through all the questions that people sent in. So if we didn't go to yours or the topic, apologies, but we'll get through as much as we can. But I really like this one. What's the best way to keep an orderly and clean repository? Like if you think about your repository's health, is there anything you do to make sure you're cleaning up and properly maintaining it? Nick, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I have a couple of practices that I like to use. One is I like to, as I said, commit frequently and push infrequently. You want to, if you're going to inflict your code on the rest of the team, you want to make sure it's in a good state, ready to compile, ready to be used and seen by everybody else. But I like to commit frequently in order to keep any particular commit small, easy to manage, and easy to revert if need be, or easy to take a look at, code review, all those good things that come from smaller commits.
Awesome. Anybody else have thoughts on that or anything specific to share? Rob.
One of the things that's really important with Git is to not commit built assets. These things are going to change a lot, and you're going to end up with merge conflicts on everything. Anything that you build, anything that you download, with minor exceptions, should not be in Git. It's better to get your DevOps process to rebuild it or re-download it. That will keep your repository size small, and it'll also keep your repository clean. Once you've got that process solved, then the next thing is about branching and merging strategy and a commit strategy, making sure that you're telling the story that you want to tell with each change. So at that point, commit frequently, but then rebase those commits together, squash them together, and tell that story. You don't need to tell all the mistakes that you made, like that wasn't it. Instead, I like to commit really frequently, and then when I get ready to tell that story, squash them all together and say, this is me developing the feature. All the steps are less important. Other hygiene tips, using branches effectively can be helpful. finding a branching naming strategy works out really well, whether that's Git flow or GitHub flow or other strategies. But that will help keep your repository clean as well.
Awesome. Carl, I believe you had some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, it's a bit continuing with Rob. I think for me, in the last year, the biggest change that I did is I found this thing called conventional commits, and I think it's a standard that comes from Angular. I forget, but it's like a standard for commit messages and how to structure your whole commit message. So like you start with like a type, okay, this is a refactor, this is a chore, this is a feature, this is this. Then you have like a small description and you write your longer description. It's supposed to make it easier to like, if you auto generate like change logs and things like that, to have like a standardized flow. But I just like it because it kind of like keeps it succinct. Like, okay, like what was I doing here? Okay, I was developing a feature, and what is it? And if there's extra detail, write it below, because I think it's really important, like Rob said, like if you have like thoughts or like history or what you were trying to do, like leave like, I use git blame a lot. We haven't talked about git blame, but like, I mean, that's in utter subversion and things like that. But I use git blame a lot to just go back and like, even when I'm inspecting code, like on GitHub, like if I want to learn like, okay, what brought this change in some open source project, like I'll just look at the git blame. So having this kind of history and this structured commit message, I find is really useful to like kind of like create this institutional knowledge that'll always be there, because like your commit messages are never going away unless like you wipe your repo for some reason. So it's really important to like leave a lot of information in there if you can. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about it.
Right on.
Good. I'll add one more thing and say that a good structured commit message is very, very valuable. We would we had a requirement that all your work be the result of a JIRA ticket, and every commit had to have that JIRA ticket as the beginning of the commit message, had to have the JIRA ticket number in front of it with a little colon, and then you put your comment. So if you ever wanted to find all the changes for a specific JIRA ticket, you could do that.
I don't know. Sean, looked like you had some thoughts there as well.
I mean, I definitely iterate with Rob was saying about squashing your merges when you're merging a feature branch into a main branch. One thing we also do is we do tag releases. So we're doing tag releases instead of creating the separate branch of deployment, creating these separate mechanisms for deploying or to go, or I mean, that's the basic thing, is to deploy into different, like into a development environment. And I'm dealing more with the web side of things. So more into deploying the branch into a dev environment, into a staging environment, or to a production. So we use tags a lot, and then reiterating a lot with not committing compiled assets into the repository will definitely. Also, I think one of the big things we do is delete a featured branch after we're done with it, to help clean up. I know GitHub does a good job at like saving that, and so we can always reference that later. But usually when we clone down the repository, we don't have that branch in there. We no longer need it.
I know. And Meriem, any thoughts on health and cleanliness of a repo?
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing to do when we want to clean up a repo is make a kind of local wiki of how to thread along the code we wrote, and then removing the previous comment history with a single comment, of the final count for a cycle. This, I guess, is just a good idea and a good start. Before all the guys said, and I agree with them.
We had a couple people ask about Git garbage. I don't think they're referring to the low-level porcelain the plumbing garbage collection, but more like, what about your deleted branches, or when you're deleting a branch or you're hard resetting, or you have all those things in detached states, like your old stashes. Like how much of that are you concerned about? Is that something that you think about? Like, is that part of your active management? And this, if you have thoughts on this, just please speak up. I think this one, I won't call on you. Go ahead, Rob.
What's really cool, kind of like managed languages, we moved from C to JavaScript on purpose because we didn't have to allocate memory. We didn't have to free memory. Git does that as well. The moment that we let go of all the references to that commit, delete our unused feature branch, delete stash changes, then Git will come through and clean that up for us. The command is called git gc, and it gets run under the hood whenever it needs to. So it will pack all of the commits into really small files, and that works out really well. The majority of the time, your .git folder is going to be smaller than your checkout folder for exactly this reason. To that end, I don't worry about it very much at all. More, I'm worrying about keeping my Git log clean by deleting extraneous branches, maybe rebasing my feature branches on top of my develop branch so that my line is straighter. But towards those extraneous things, they'll get cleaned up in time. I don't need to worry about it.
Right on. Other thoughts?
I think locally, I don't care so much. I think reiterating with Rob, I don't care so much locally. It's about the remote that I care more about, and making sure that that is cleaned up and the cleanliness and the health of that is in a solid state, so that when we have another developer who comes on board, it's easier for them to get the things they need. It's not packed with extra things that they don't need or anything that's not currently in development.
Right on. Sake of time, we're going to move on to the next round of questions here. We had a number of people write in about rebase. Someone phrased it, I find rebase to be one of the most difficult commands to teach people. How do you explain it? And like, when is the right time to use rebase? Okay, Rob.
What's really cool about rebase is it has two modes. The goal of rebase is to be able to change your history. Now, with another version control system, maybe Subversion or TFS, the moment that you committed it, you were completely done. With Git, that's not the case. I can rewrite the history. I can take commits and I can squish them together, or I can remove a commit or reorder them. Or I can, and here's why it's called rebase, I can change the base commit. So if I have a bunch of commits that are off here on this feature branch, and my main branch has continued on, I may want to rebase them. I may want to take all of these and move them to a new parent commit. So I can pop open rebase and I can say git rebase and give it this other branch, and it will take all of those commits and set them on top. Now they will end up with different git hashes because the git hash is a combination of the content and the parent hashes, and I have changed the parent hashes. But that, in a sense, that rebase is the ability to move those commits around. If I do a git rebase and I put in a -i for interactive mode, then I can start to reorder them or reword them or squash them together. Rebase is really powerful, and it kind of unlocks that piece where previously we could think of commits as hard-coded elements the moment that we let go. And instead, with rebase, we can make them a little bit more fluid. It's really fun.
Right on. That's a very succinct answer. Anybody else have anything to add on to that?
I'll just say one thing is I use rebase way more. I feel like I almost never use merge anymore. Like I much prefer. I mean, I think it's an important discussion. I don't know if there's a question coming up like the Git flow versus like how you want to structure like your history, but I like it linear. So like rebase is like key for that. And I remember being really mad. Like I had some open source directories and it took a while before GitHub supported like rebasing. So like you get this history with all these merge commits that to me, they just pollute. They pollute the history. So it's just, I don't really, I think it's a hard command to learn because it's kind of like, you can do a lot of things with it. Like Rob said, you can squish commits, you can like move them to the top, you can do a whole bunch of things with it. And it's all kind of folded together under this kind of rebase command, which makes it really, really intimidating to learn at first. But I think it's a really important, I think it's probably the most important command like to learn in the long run to me. Like you're just going to learn to like clean up and have like, we've talked a lot about like the health of your repo, having good commit messages, good history. And really the main tool that you're going to use for that is rebase. And like if you need to squish commits because you had like a ton of commit for your feature or things like that. So it's a bit intimidating to learn at first, but I would just say start with just trying to move. I think the easiest one to do at first is just try to move the commit to the front. Like they'll try to squash things together, or maybe actually try to squash. Rob probably knows better than me, but I just think it's really important to learn, and it's worth taking a bit of time, even though it might be a bit intimidating.
Do you actively have a preferred Git flow and methodology for, getting your code to production? How that looks, Rob?
I'll start since I brought it up. I'll just go real quick. I mean, I like it linear. I like it linear. I remember being really appealed when the Git flow article came out. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But really, I'm much more like Sean. Like I'd rather tag and have like a linear history than have like a branch for production and a branch for this, and then managing all the merges and keeping everything in sync. I think the term for it, and somebody can correct me after I'm done, I think it's like master deployable, like this idea that like your master branch should always be deployable, basically. I followed that. I think that's, for me, is the way I do it.
Yep. Rob?
That's actually called GitHub flow, and GitHub is really proud of that. It's really cool, where from master or now main, I just branch off, I do my thing, I get comments, and I merge that back into master, and master main is always deployable. Git flow is another great workflow that kind of focuses on a branching naming convention that allows you to, given any branch name, know what stage in the process it is. And that's really cool. There's also mechanisms where you can branch on release to kind of get, if you need to support older versions and continue their history moving forward. The part that I really love about Git, though, is that none of these workflows are baked into the process. If you need a workflow process that isn't any of these, then Git can facilitate that as well. If you have a workflow process that really worked for you in Subversion or in TFS or in SourceSafe, you can do that in Git too.
Right on.
Yep. We were a classic, last time I was an SDM, software development manager, we were a classic Git flow organization, but we also had the need to support multiple versions. So we kind of had a Git flow that worked also into a branch on release system. So it was a little more complex than we would have liked, but it really worked well for us, having to manage those multiple releases and multiple versions out in the field.
Meriem, I'm curious, do you have a preferred methodology here?
I'm following the classic methods, but I'm very much of old school here.
And Sean, I think you mentioned it earlier. You use the tagging. Do you have a name for that? Like you guys internally call it?
We don't have a name internally that we call it, but the one thing I think that is great is that the Git flow could work based upon whatever your needs are. And I think Rob mentioned that like it's doable based upon that. So we have some projects, a lot of our newer projects, we have followed the method of the tagging system. But there's a lot of projects we inherited from the old that are doing a branch for production, a branch for development, a branch for like staging. And we're doing that. And I think we prefer the tagging method just because it helps us create a better picture, and it helps us in the long run realize like what we're actually what we're actually pushing up, what we're doing. It also lets us know like, hey, at this particular point, we know all of this stuff is part of that. Whereas it's like when we have separate branches, we become a little confused as to what we're doing, and it becomes a little bit hard to manage, I think, in the long run. So we prefer the tagging method, and we think that works best for us, but we're able to adapt to usually, I think, whatever workflow we inherit.
Right on. Well, we're getting here to the end of time. I would love to just give everybody like a chance to give a parting shot. And what single good piece of advice do you think someone that's new to Git or learning Git or early stages of Git, like what should they focus on as they advance next? Carl, you had a look on your face there. Why don't we start with you on this one?
We haven't talked about it, and I think there's a reason why. I would say the biggest thing you should avoid to save yourself a lot of pain and misery in the future is don't touch Git modules. Because I've had to do that for one of my consulting clients, and we're stuck managing it now. And honestly, if I could go back and not do it that way, I would definitely not. I think it's a challenge. I mean, we could probably have like a separate discussion on how to manage different libraries or like subsplit, like a subtree split, or how to branch out like different Git repos and bring them together. But that was like the Git solution, and just don't do it. Just find some other solution. Save yourself.
All right, Meriem, what would you give advice to people learning?
Well, first of all, people should not be afraid of learning. That's very important. Excuse me. So people want to get involved in projects and GitHub and broaden their skills. They have many issues. They don't know how to use Git. Well, first of all, go with the basics, the basic commands of Git. Then ahead of your time, you can learn new things, and don't push yourself and use the very complex methods or commands at a time. So that will save you a lot of time, of course. Don't go and use rebase at first, because that's gonna kill the process, of course. And just keep it simple at first, and with the project growing up, you can learn much more about it.
Cool. Sean.
I don't know. It's hard to reiterate, or not reiterate, what everybody else has been saying. So, yeah. So I'm not going to repeat myself.
All right, fair enough. Nick.
One thing I always stress to new developers is you haven't really made a mistake until you push. That everything's still local. If you get into a bad state, or you've committed something you didn't want to commit, or you did something you didn't want to do on your machine and you just want to erase everything, until you push, you haven't really inflicted anything on anybody. So that's my one tip to the new developers: make sure they understand.
That's a good one. And Rob, you get the final word here.
I want to build on Nick's thought. You can't break Git. Everything that you do is undoable, rewritable. You can uncommit, you can unstage. You can't break Git. As you're wandering through, you may choose to use excessive branches as kind of mile markers. If you're about to do a big merge or a big commit, put in a bunch of branches where you have all of the things right now, so that if anything happens, you can get back to those commits really easily. The other thing I'll say is that there's nothing magic about any of us here. We were all in your shoes at some point. Whether you're new to Git or whether you're very experienced at Git, you can progress with your knowledge. We've given you lots of interesting information here and lots of cool ideas. If you've gotten inspired, if you found a command that you'd like to learn, that's great. Go pursue that and run with it and really enjoy this journey. The next step is yours. You got this.
Awesome. That's a great way to end it. So thank you, everybody, for being part of GitKon.